Welcome everyone to the third in our series of seminars for veteran student issues. Today we're pleased to have a panel of faculty members from across the campus who are here to share some ideas and some tips and pointers on working with veteran students. And what we'll do today is we'll have each of them give us some thoughts and comments, and then we'll leave the last half of our hour available for questions and answers. So please, as they're speaking, do not hesitate to write down questions that you would like to ask. There are notepads around on the tables. If there's not a notepad next to you, there's a whole stack of them right back there that Barbara is holding in Vanna White for us. So there's pens and paper. Please write down your questions and comments. And first of all, I want to make sure I thank Dean Burns for providing the refreshments today. We have lots of cookies and a few gallons of sweet tea. We want to make sure we consume all of it. So however many of us there are, we have to eat all of them before you can leave. We have to clean up everybody's plate. That's one back there. Today, we are pleased to have with us, and I'm going to read from your right to left. Christy Serrano is from the English department. Rebecca Heath is from accounting. Larry Burris from journalism, and Pat Ritchie from speech and theater. We thank you all for participating, for agreeing to participate with us. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you folks so you can make some comments and take it away. Whoever wants to start.
All right, I guess I'll go first. I'm Pat Ritchie, teaching speech and theater. My main job is actually a debate coach on campus. This is a big job for ex-military because they get rowdy too. And my background is Army. I was in the reserves. I was in the civil affairs unit. So there was very little reserve about the reserves for me. I was a student vet at first because I was activated my senior year of my undergraduate degree. Went to Iraq, came back, finished up, and now I'm teaching as a professor here. And so I've been on both sides of the fence, both a student vet and now a professor vet. And so I kind of see the situation from both sides of the fence. And the way I look at it is I've got two ways of approaching vets. And the first is that most vets are good students who are actually usually above par. They're high speed. They get things done. They're no problem whatsoever. That doesn't be the majority of the vets I do because they still have that military kind of mentality. But there's also another side of vets that struggle. And it's almost always that leaving the world of the military and coming to the world of a student. And the shift usually happens very quickly for a lot of them. Within months or so, they go from a world that's very structured, very rigid, to a world where they're accountable for themselves and the people who may be the same age as them, but who are a lot younger maturity-wise than they are. And so that leads to some hiccups. And so as a teacher, I prefer to look at vets as I do all other students at a playing level because I don't like the idea of giving advantage to anyone. But beyond that, there's a couple things that I kind of look for in vets that I know they're kind of indicators. And so the first thing in this little sheet here is I look for identification. Because the first thing I've got to do with vets is I got to identify who they are. Beyond who they are and what they look like, who's in my class. And I do this for all my students. I have them write a little 2-page paper about who they are, pretty generic, but it gives me as a professor a lot of insight into the minds of these students. And that identifies them. And then I kind of look at, are these the type of vets who want to be included in the class, or then like they want to be singled out as veterans? Or do they want to just melt into the class like everybody else? Because it's really a person-by-person scenario. And so I kind of keep that in mind too, because some of them don't want to be known as vets. They've done their time, they're done with it, they're sick of it, leave them alone. Others are proud and have no problem with it. But I don't like to make a blanket statement about them. And so I look at that. And then when it comes to the actual students, I had a couple of other things. I tend to keep track of their attendance and their work. Because, like I said, vets tend to be very good students. So if all of a sudden their attendance starts to drop or their work quality starts to drop, that tells me there's something going on because that's not indicative of the performance of a soldier or a vet. So there's probably something going on either with school, at home, or somewhere, but it's a red flag. And so I kind of keep an eye on them, and I'm very personal, approachable with my students. as a veteran. I think that helps a little bit, but I also see this with other types of students. So it's not just a vet friendship, but students who seem to think that the professors care about them are willing to open up. And so you can get more out of them. And then I try to figure out, what's going on and then refer them to the right people. And that's why I put on here this help chain of command, because I know some professors want to be the Dr. Phils, and that's not always a good idea. And so if they're having struggles with school, I want to make sure they get to an academic counselor of some sort to help them get back on track. If they're having personal family problems, that's definitely way out of my league. And so try to get into some kind of counseling or some kind of help that way. And most vets, even though they're grudgingly about it, if they know what's going on, they'll usually seek it because that military kind of kicks back into them. And they say, okay, well, then I'll go do it because you asked me to. But they won't volunteer because vets have a huge issue with pride. And I mean, I can understand that myself. So that's something that as a teacher, you kind of got to overcome and know up front. And then the last thing I put on there is just know that they're rough around the edges. It's just the nature of the game. I came out of the Army and I thought it was pretty bad until last fall I had a sailor and made my ears turn red. And it was just part of his everyday vocabulary because he was so fresh. And it's gonna take him a while to kind of de-sailorize and become a civilian again. He can't use the F word every other word. But it wasn't intentional or derogatory towards somebody like he was personally attacking him. It was just part of his language. And so they're going to be they can be sometimes rough around the edges. You just got to take that with a grain of salt, as long as it's obviously not being derogatory or if they're sexually harassing somebody or, discriminating or profiling or something like that. But if it's just part of who they are, then just know, some of these kids were in Afghanistan 6 months ago, and now they're in your class. And so you've got to think about complete life changes in seconds for that. So that's kind of my take as both a student veteran and a teacher veteran.
I'm Larry Burris from the School of Journalism. I was an Ohio State ROTC graduate for 20 years in the Air Force and then 30 years here. A lot of that concurrent, obviously. I'm not 90 years old yet. I'm really kind of sorry to see the folks in the records office here because I want to give some how to game the system sort of thing for the veterans. I kind of disagree with Pat a little bit. College was designed for 18-year-olds, and part of my job when they were all 18 was to help them grow up. Somebody who's been in theater for the last 6 months doesn't need help in growing up, so I tend to treat the veterans a little differently. I try to find out who they are fairly quickly. I have on my syllabus that I was in the Air Force for 20 years, so that tells them right away who I am. Occasionally the veteran will come up and say, where did you serve, what did you do? I'm a veteran too, so I can kind of use that. One of the courses I teach is mass media and national security, and there I'm able to use the veterans very, very deliberately. And I will ask them, or if they come up and volunteer, I will ask them, can you talk about your experiences? Can we use you as an example? I'd like you to jump in a little bit more if you could and talk about your issues with media and national security, those sorts of issues. One of the things that I'll do, Kathy, you don't need to listen to this particular part, but I think we do need to help the veterans a little more. Not because they can't do the work, but because it is a special group. It's an older group. And I treat the veterans, I guess, much like I treat my older students. Again, they've grown up already. It's not like having an 18-year-old where you really stick to the rules. It says in the syllabus, here's what you have to do. You're 19 years old. I'm helping you learn how to be an adult. Do this. With the veterans, I can be a little looser with that. And the best example I've got of how that works, if a student, again, when I say student, when a 19-year-old is having trouble, I'll try to get them some help. But here's the rules. Here's what we do. A veteran, on the other hand, for example, I'm fairly free with the incompletes on the veterans. If a veteran's having trouble, I will say flat out to them, don't drop the course. Why don't you take it incomplete and don't bother coming back the rest of the term. Work on your other courses and we'll figure out how to get you an incomplete. I would never say that to a 19-year-old. Absolutely not. But again, the veterans don't need help in growing up. They've grown up already. And so I think we can, the veteran still has to do the work, but I think we can play a little looser with the rules for veterans. That's kind of how I approach that. One war story, so kind of telling war stories, I guess. In the national security class, I was able to bring in an NSA agent to talk about as much as he could what he did for the NSA, how he interacted with media. I had a sailor in the class who'd been in intelligence and asked the NSA agents, I introduced him as Brad Shea, and the sailor who'd been in intelligence said, is Brad Shea your real name? And the NSA agent said, well, yes, it's my real name. And kind of smiled a little bit. The sailor said, no, is that really your name? He said, well, I've got my ID card here with my name, Brad Shea, on it. And the sailor said, again, I see this on your ID card. Is that your real name? And the NSA agent said, you know how the game is played, don't you? And the other students are just kind of, what's going on here? But we were then able to relate some real, again, security issues, classification issues, identification issues with media. So again, you kind of draw the students out of the veterans out into real world situations, again, because they are adults more so than a 19-year-old. That's kind of what I try to do with them.
Hi, Rebecca Heath. I teach in the county. I was regular Army, but it was a long time ago. I served from 82 to 85 at that recruiting ground in Medway, Utah. I was a 92 Delta Chemical Laboratory Specialist.
Let's get you in the media. Or not.
And we worked with nurse agent mustard, so it was very interesting. But I did my 3 years. I got my money for school, and I got out. I did marry a retired military guy. He did his 20 years regular Army. I don't baby vets, and for the most part, they don't ask for any special help. The one main thing I found, and I mean, I haven't, this is just my second semester here at NTSU, but I had a guy come and he said, you know, I'm in the middle of getting my paperwork done, and so I don't have money to buy books. And so I don't know how often that happens, but that was okay. And, you know, I copied chapters, or, you know, I lent him a book. I can't remember which I did. But, you know, a lot of people have complicated lives. And I just, if I know someone's a vet, I assume their life is a little more complicated than, you know, some of the 19-year-olds on campus. So it's just a matter of, you know, being accommodating. So yes, like taking assignments late, just being understanding. And, you know, I've never had a vet try to take advantage of my easy nature. That they just don't do it. So, I mean, they're always just a pleasure to have in class.
I'm Christy Serrano. I served active duty Army. I was over in Korea for a year, down in Chontek. I married my husband, who was also active duty with the senior NCO, and got out a couple years after I did. And I have been working with veterans in a couple of different ways. So one of the things, and I was accounting in the military, and now I'm English, so just, yeah, we're all over the place. But when I was in a grad student, or had just recently finished up my PhD, I was actually working on a military naval air base in Fort Worth. And so almost all of my students were full-time active duty. Once in a while I'd get, you know, a wife or maybe somebody from law enforcement. It was predominantly the soldiers. And I'll say, when you have an entire class of soldiers, you know, as opposed to where here at this university you'll have a couple soldiers amidst the rest of them, it's a different scenario. And so when I was working with them, which kind of, you know, maybe explained some of my points in terms of like maintaining my expectations. The service members would be like, come on, Professor Serrano, let it slide. I'm working full time, trying to go to school full time. Give me a break, give me some extra time. And I'd have to remind them, in part, I have to maintain, you know, these standards for you because you're older, because you have that working against you. You're not the hotshot teenager coming out of college now. So, you know, you need to work just as hard as anybody else, so that that way your skills reflect what you need them to. So you can do the job and compete with those the young kids coming out. Because a lot of them, you know, they would have had 20-some years in. So it was a very different ballgame for them. That said, a lot of the students that I have now, you know, I've had them fresh out of training. I've had some of them here that are still, you know, active guard. I've had some of them that are now retired for 20 years. So you do have a range of them. But I would say they all want to do well. They are, for the most part, high speed. And I try and treat them, for the most part, just like my other students, in terms of, you know, you need to get things taken care of. This has to happen if they're new to the system. Because I've had a lot of students that are like, oh, but Professor Serrano, I can't, how am I supposed to type out a paper? I don't have a computer yet. And then it's like, you've got 10 labs, they're computer labs, they're open all night. You can go find a computer and type up your assignment. And sometimes that's some of their adjustment, is they have to figure out what things are and where they are. So in those terms, I try to be patient with them and make sure they get to where they need to go, because they don't know yet. In some of the other things, I would just say, I'm just kind of going through my list because we were supposed to put together some best practices. And again, these are things that I would use for all of my classes, but I find that these are particularly helpful with veterans for various reasons. You know, one of our military sayings is you don't want to be stuck on stupid. And so I try and, you know, for me, when the vets are in, as well as other students, if they know why they're doing something, what are they getting out of it? It's helpful. So I try and be very clear or concrete with it. So even if we're doing a grammar review, I'll say, obviously, you know, I'm composition. I want you guys to make sure that you sentence structures, you know, whatever I say. But also, when you go out to the job market and you start applying for jobs, there are companies that will throw your applications away if you put commas in the wrong spot or if you don't know how to state something. And so this is the place to work on it here and make sure you understand it. And I always have my veterans shaking their head, absolutely. Yep, they understand that. And so they pay attention and will take notes. So again, and it's little and it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but everything I do, I try and explain to them the purpose of it. So, you know, you're trying to integrate, you know, sources, or you're trying to do this, or this is how that's going to help you, as opposed to just, you know, giving assignments and they don't know why they're doing them or where they're going or how they all work together. The other thing is, if you've been doing something for 10 years, you may need to be asking yourself, why am I doing this? It may be a good time to change tactics or get a different, you know, pedagogical stance on something so that you can make sure that they are able to get something out of it. Again, one of the biggest complaints I always get in English is flexibility on group assignments. Nobody likes group assignments. We all hate group assignments, especially the ones who are motivated because you get stuck doing all the work. Okay, we all know this. But especially given that there are these different kind of communities. I mean, when you're dealing with veterans, some of them want to be integrated, some of them don't. But they still have to learn how to work with other people and get along with other people in a lot of different environments. So I still use group assignments. Sometimes I'll just make it in class only. But if they're paired assignments or I let them choose who they want to work with. I have a veteran who was infantry for 27 years, and he was like, he got assigned something in a science group, and he's working with 5 girls that can't stop giggling and are wasting his time, and he's getting really irritated because his daughter lives somewhere out of a different town, he's living somewhere else out of a different town, and then he has to come back to campus just to work with them, and they never get anything done, and they giggle and talk about the cute people in the library. And he's like, seriously? No. So I try and help kind of avoid some of those tensions by allowing them to choose their groups. Or if it's new, you know, early on in the semester, we'll do things like speed dating so they can find out more about the class members and what their likes are or their work management style, so they can recommend to me who they want to work with so they can get more like-minded people to work together. Again, I try and do integrating learning styles. That same soldier was just telling me the other day that he'd been jumping out of airplanes, and he goes, I guess I hit my head too many times on the drop zone because when I just read things, they don't make a lot of sense to me. And so he appreciates having you know, LibriVox, which is an audio, you know, an audio place where he can pull the literature down and he can listen to it, or group work. So it'll help him do some, it helps develop kind of, you know, his memory skills as well. So again, trying to make sure you integrate some learning styles, again, helpful to everybody, but especially so, especially when they've been out of academics and traditional academics for a long time, or may never have been in them. So to get them multiple ways of learning so they do retain. And again, I always just maintain my expectations. I'm not going to settle for a lesser work for them. I mean, these are soldiers. They know what it's like. They know what sacrifice is. They know they might have to stay up a little late to get that paper done. They know that there's a standard, and I know they can meet it. And I have the same standard with the other students, but I don't lessen it just because they're adults, returning students, or veterans. I will work with them. And I think that's what any of my students will tell you, is I will work with any of my students who need help. My door is always open. But I especially work with my vets, because if they do have issues, I had a student who at one point in time came to me, and he had PTSD, and he had a meltdown one week, and he had literally just gotten released from the mental hospital and came right to class. And he was like, they wouldn't even give me a pencil. So, but I'm here. Obviously, I needed to work with that student on that. So, and then I just always follow up with them. I've had people with a lot of PTSD here on campus, and then say their wife dies or something else happens. And I worry about them a little bit more than just regular students who have any other kinds of deaths with them. And so I'll keep in touch with them on email, or I will follow up with them when I see them in class, because they can go through a lot of different stresses that, you know, other people may or may not understand if they come back and have more issues. So, you know, but by the same token, I suspect that there's a lot of people from Memphis that have gone through a lot of issues that I don't understand either. So for all of my students, we're trying to keep that open door and willingness to talk, and then follow up with them and make sure they're okay, or how things are going, or what else I can do to help.
Excellent comments. Now, this is our opportunity to ask questions.
I hear over and over again, what you're talking about, Pat, the clubs, they don't want to go to disabled student services. And I know, I've been here 17 years. I know people have relied on disabled student services quite a bit. How do we work around that issue? How do we get them extended time to complete assignments if they have a verifiable disorder, if it's PTSD or something like that? They don't want to be tagged as VSS. They told me that was time and time again. How do we work around that? Don't all answer it.
We'll take time to bring next person.
Self-determination is such a choice.
You have to emphasize that everybody needs help in some areas, just maybe in areas where you need particular help. I had a student in a class and it institutionalized for a period of time, and I talked about it in class. It was a small seminar, and somebody made a crack about disabled, and this was several years ago now, made a crack about being disabled in mental institutions. And he flat out said, I have a certificate that shows I'm sane. Do you have one of those? And I just sort of broke it all up. And, you know, sometimes, I just try to emphasize, sometimes people, we all need help. And the strongest ones are the ones who can go get help. If you're trying to be strong, then ask for help. Just like when you were on a mission, you may have to have somebody, you had to have somebody else do a particular job because you couldn't do it all. Well, if you can't do it all here, and I think kind of Walt sort of said, we need to be tougher sometimes, you know, that you can't do it all. And if you want to complete the mission, graduate from here, you're going to need some help. Thank you very much. And, that's worked a couple times.
And Jimmy, sometimes I have actually I've offered to walk over there with them and said, if you want to go to counseling services or if you need, you know, whatever you need, I'll go with you. You know, so you don't have to go there alone. I'll do that. And a lot of times, just even the offer, they'll go, okay, I'll go, but you don't have to go. But they needed to know that somebody was going to support them in their effort. So sometimes I've done that. The other thing is, I thought was kind of interesting. It wasn't that long ago. I've heard some sort of statistic on a news program that said if all of our vets came, if all of our, soldiers came home right now, we don't have enough counselors in place to take care of all of them. And yeah, I mean, and I find that to be a very scary statistic. And so that's where my personality is, I will not, that's not an option. They don't get that option if I'm concerned about their safety to choose to opt out. I don't do that. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. And I say, you need to go. The bottom line is, there could be all sorts of stuff going on. If you won't go here, you have the VA services down here, down the road a piece. We can go there, but you've got to get some sort of help. I mean, and I have an extremely hard-headed husband who refuses to use these services, and you literally have to muscle him and don't give up on it. And then I always will follow up. Did you go? 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 And I don't care if I'm that one on their side, because I know if I am, they'll do it. Because I'm more worried about that. And I'll tell them straight up, I don't care if it's pulling on their heartstrings. I'll say, I'm worried about you. You need the help. I can't do anything until I get that piece of paper. But I'm worried about your safety, and I'm worried about your success.
That's an issue Bravo's going to bring up again.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of students, I've had to kind of the same, had to step them through the process and said to the student, would you go on the website and read about counseling service? All you got to do. Would you just go on the website and read about it? And when you've done that, come back, we'll talk some more. Next stage, would you go over to the University Center and walk by the door? Don't need to go in, just walk by the door. And once they've done that, then come back and talk to me. We'll do some more. I finally got them in the door. Got some help. Because it can be hard to go over there. I'm not crazy. And people go in there just, I don't need that sort of help. Well, the fact that you're so adamant that you say you don't need the help is a clue that maybe you need some help here and kind of little baby steps.
Is the counseling center prepared to handle these situations?
I was going to say, what I didn't haven't had to do it here. This is only my second year. But when I was at Southern Mississippi, I prefer to take it with a VA. Luckily, we were right here. We were very close to a VA, and they seem to be a lot more open to a VA counselor than they are a normal student counselor because, again, that pride. At least if it's in the system, they know it's somebody in the system they at least can somewhat relate to.
Our counselors here are aware, they are working with VA. We can take it here for intermittent sort of thing.
Hillary, is there, one of the concerns I had that came right out of one of my soldiers now, I don't want to have to sit there and say it over and over and over again. Can they get some sort of, is it consistent if they were to go here on campus?
Get the same counselor.
Yeah.
I think, was it Jane going to work for them? And then we also had a counselor that was coming here and no one was going to see them. If we had some regularness to it, the VA was willing to send somebody here. And he came, volunteering for maybe a year, every Tuesday.
But those VA counselors can't give us that call.
Right.
That's
Right.
exactly
I mean,
That's the issue. They don't want to have that group on.
Right.
It's like starting right.
It's not a permanent tattoo.
I think that most of them work with the same person once you know it, like any person does. But I think James is going to see him here and then help us transition to VA if need be.
Since there's that fear of the piece of paper, again, gaining the system here, I've had disabled students sort of email me. Rather than the student bring me a piece of paper that they got to carry around and they're going to go in the file somewhere, I've had John Harris email me. This student gets extra time, whatever it is. That way they're not carrying around that scarlet A. It's just completely, I don't know how legal that is, but it gets the job done.
That's
what
how
they do.
Right.
Right. But that initial, for the 19-year-olds, I had them bring me the piece of paper. We're going to follow the rules here, but again, for the adults, the older students, have John send an email. Don't worry about that piece of paper that you supposedly need. You don't need to carry it around.
I know that Heather Conrad in the military center, the Veteran Vet Success Program on the on campus,
I know she's worked with John Harris, from time to time, students do not want the stigma of going to Salem Student Services, so they would just kind of pass the papers among them, so the student would have to go over to Salem Student Services.
I think we need to have a director.
So we have an issue to work through with, and I appreciated the comment about the stigma of the new form. There shouldn't be a stigma associated with that new form. It's just a matter of fact, it's a stigma.
I think they have concern, Penny, about the needs in the system and about further job placement, things like that. I think that was the question, looking back at my notes on that process.
Perhaps we should emphasize that it doesn't go on your form
Correct. I think they were worried about.
or your
clearance.
transcript. It's not, it can show up anywhere on anything, any employer is going to find. Any other questions? Any comments? Any other comments along that line or questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm in this, folks out there, and, one, thing I saw, like, they have on, sign for veterans is about grants and scholarships, and, about filing the FAFSA. Now, been going to school this entire time and using that, plus I draw disability, just support myself on. And, I haven't worked in a number of years, it's been 3 years since I've actually, worked at a job, and then on the FAFSA, they want to ask about a W-2, and I'm like, what, like, if you don't have that, so.
So, and the question is how to accomplish the FAFSA without a W-2.
Yes.
And now, I'm not a financial aid counselor, but we have a whole bevy of them. My thought is that what they will tell you is that you have no income, right? Is that correct? So, it's going to be zero or fast.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I do, let me tell you, please go to the financial aid office and ask them that question, because they are the experts. They can, you don't have to go in there asking for scholarship money, you can ask them questions about knowing how fast.
Okay.
That's a very important question.
Okay.
Based on we did tax return, they will take it as the.
Oh, okay. All right.
A lot of people that have income for various reasons. So
Exactly.
it may be a problem, it may kick it out if they want verification to show how you are supporting that job. 30% or so get asked to verify. So just have your information ready. Start early. Kathy prepared a presentation with the vet in January that we did a vet financial aid program. So.
Well, just a matter of interest, we've been talking about vets, factors, about faculty, veterans, experience, working your way back in academics. It's been a while for you, Larry.
Not that
You out there.
Really?
So, what form don't you want to carry around?
Really? Which question?
I have an elective question. I actually advised the students that last night, and he has transfer credits from the military, like 7, so I didn't know how to work for that. It's 7 hours from the military. So what is our policy on accepting? I don't know how to handle those.
Had he presented his transcript to the university to have credit applied to the university, or was he just telling you that he had
He
credit?
had them, and I suggested he go to records, but can you tell me what is happening in that scenario?
The gentleman that he will need to see is sitting right here, Mr. Right here.
Just kind of an idea of what the process is, so I can
Yeah, I'll let Scott
handle
tell
it next time.
What they do, they bring documents to the admissions office. DD 14 or living on these papers. New transcript of joint services transcript, and you can request online, and they'll send it to me electronically, and then we do the plan evaluation. And it's all posted as a list.
So the person's name to remember is Scott first.
I'll add to that, for advising purposes, advising for basic and life sciences, we see a lot of veterans that bring in, sometimes 30, 40 credits from the military. And it all does appear as elective credit. It's all with the greater P, so there's no impact on the GPA. But alongside the DD 215, there's another transcript called the SMART transcript, and that is all the course description. And that's where it has to be evaluated course by course. And luckily for our major, we can accept a lot of military credit for engineering or math or aerospace. You know, so a lot of that credit does fit very nicely into our majors. But sometimes they'll have courses, and that's where you have to read the description. It might be something about communications, but you know, in that wherever that job function was, they were presenting, they were training. So we've oftentimes accepted that for speech. You know, it just varies from course to course. It takes some extra work to get it done and get it in, because if everything that is an agreement, it all has to be brought in course day using a substitution form. So we'll sometimes have veterans with 6 or 7 pages of substitution, but if their specialty in the military matches the major that we're sitting here, it just doesn't make sense to not do the credit.
Right. Also, you may ask a question a while ago. When you guys coming up, did you all see this formula card downstairs?
Yeah.
Formula card. There's my picture in there. I used to be younger then. But anyway, what it is I have 4 or 5 of these projects in the afternoon for fun I do. And I always look for veterans to join. And 2 of the captains on this team are veterans. But they come in, they become a part of the team. So they have a lot of ability to teach the younger kids about responsibility and teamwork. All the veterans, when they come, they got to become engineers in technology. I don't believe they should go to liberal arts or anywhere else. They should come to see us. Sorry. No, they history and English to improve. No, it's okay. Because their mind works perfect. So they mentor the younger kids, and the younger kids are mentoring them to study, to help them in homework and a lot. So I have the Mumbai team leader is a veteran. I have a solar boat team is a 20 years veteran, and they are doing fantastic job. So if you have a couple of those guys, you mentor them, you know, they become a part of the team, and as a result of that, because they are part of the team, they stay and they graduate. They help the other students, and the other students help them, because now they are a family, and they do a really good job.
I guess I'll answer Jim's question about bureaucracy. I think that's one of the areas where soldiers, and I definitely myself excel, because I mean, most soldiers come out of their branch of the military as PowerPoint rangers. And so they know what happens when you don't turn in a piece of paper. You end up paying $100 for a piece of gear that costs $10. And so usually soldiers are really good about that. That's the one thing I have very trouble with. They stay on top of their paperwork. They grumble and gripe nonstop. But I mean, if a soldier's not griping, then there's something truly wrong. But they usually tend to be very good with the secret, because they know that it's up to them. And myself, I think it's a valuable asset to move from being a soldier into academia, because the bureaucracy is very similar. So this hurry and wait on paperwork is part of the game.
It's not good. Yes. This is here too, right? Other questions? Comments before anyone have any other suggestions, recommendations?
We kind of talked a little bit about it, but leeway to sign it, but about attendance policy. Attendance policy, statements on.
And you want me to
Repeat
talk about,
that.
you want the panelists to talk about what they do, or first? Would you like to discuss your attendance policy?
I don't move any slack. harder than the other students. In fact, I kind of expect more because they know better. If you're 5 minutes early, you're late. But I also keep in mind that kind of level of, if they're always a late student, then that's just their personality. But all of a sudden, they're a great student, high speed, and then boom, they hit that dip. That's the red flag, and that's with any student. But especially with the military, because usually mistakes are over time. So it's just that kind of watching the pattern of the student. If something goes off, then you got to see what's wrong.
Anybody have a statement on the solar?
Exactly. Does anyone, do you actually put any sort of statement on your Silhouette that says, in case you're called up to duty or you're on the guard or anything like that? Do you have any sort of statement on your Silhouette or make any comments when you go over your Silhouette during the semester?
In English 1020, I mean, because it's a required core course, and it's also something they need to really be there for since it's kind of more of a workshopping kind of course. The class standard is, if you're missing more than 6 classes, you're most likely going to struggle to pass at that point. And because each class, there's a lot of material that we are covering, you're going to be missing something important. Not really had too many issues with the military folks not being there, but they've always, they're always like, well, I have to go guard or I'm going to be out for this or that. And I just ask for documentation. And I mean, they know, a lot of them will have their little orders or whatever. They can get a note from their company planner or something. It's more, I've had a couple of them, and again, it wasn't at this university. They would try and use their military as well. I gotta go. Well, I've been in the military. I know you've got some sort of orders. I don't even care if you're going down range to just, fire your weapon. There's something or some way you can get some sort of documentation. And so they can always get some kind of documentation to excuse it. And a lot of times they'll be the people that I don't mind, having them come to office hours and I can kind of fill them in. I don't like to do a lot of reteaching course materials, but again, a lot of times, they're the students that are invested in it, and we can cover it pretty quickly and you can just get them caught up.
I'd like to just add a word to that. They are, all the guard units I've served in for, once a year, they'll print out a drill schedule.
Yes.
Where that right there, if it works just as good as, say, a letter from your unit. If you got that from them, that, just that alone would be helpful.
Yeah. Because you get the same things from athletes, right? They'll have a schedule of away games or whatever if they're going to be gone. They'll know in advance. You always know with your soldiers when they're going to be gone. So they can tell you in advance. They can make things up early or whatever. And there's always some form of documentation for it to kind of work around that or help them out.
And I would add to that too, National Guard, you got active guard, just watch the news. There's a flood, you're probably going to lose something. There's a hurricane, a tornado, something like that. Even something as big as 9/11, immediately they get activated. They get orders. They usually have 24, 48, 96-hour kind of off time. That's where they got to go. But it shouldn't be a surprise to most people because it's obviously in the news. So if they're saying something like, oh, well, I got to go to duty, then like you said, there should be something, or like I said, you see it in the news. It's big enough, something's going on.
And a lot of times they're getting those orders retroactive.
Yes.
All of them. So I know we've been talking about getting emails from company managers. I think you have to accomplish your things, have to accommodate.
Yeah, I think so much problem with, active guard, that. It was, the best to come back at physical problem. If you hospital or instantly had a bad night. It was accommodating that. And that's where when they would come talk to somebody who's going on, it was very helpful. But still, still the rest of your students do what's going on there too. So
problem we have in the sciences. Once they miss, it's okay. They get no, it's fine. But there is a lab and things they miss that really they have to go and do it, otherwise they cannot continue. So they really need to talk to the instructor very in advance. I'm going to miss these 3 labs. Can I make up early? But when I come back, we have a graduate student stay with me and show me how to do it, because it is not something like history that you can read at home. You have to visit in the lab and do stuff. So it really would be good if they talk to me instructor very in advance, 1 month in advance, so they can find someone.
And I would say that if especially with that I would put in your syllabus. If you're gonna, if you know in advance for a particular class, come speak to me in advance so we can.
Something I've done just in general, not just working with veterans. In each of my classes, first day I pass on a sheet of paper and ask them to sign up for study groups. Put your name, contact, and when you could be in a study group, Monday, Wednesday morning or something. And then I copy that and pass it back around. So every class there will form study group to do that.
And I will add to the, Chrissy, I'm not disagreeing, and I certainly understand the schedules. There are, like 1% of the time, there may be some random thing that one individual may be called up to on a sudden notice type of situation, but it very, very seldom happens. There are those circumstances where people get called up to certain things, but they're very rare, so I don't count on that happening, but I understand that it can.
For the identification, I'm just curious, the system or Pathline doesn't identify a military.
Not that we as faculty can see. The students have to identify themselves. And as far as I know, in fact, Kathy, I'm sorry.
No, we were just talking about
I
that.
don't think we as faculty can see in a student's file if they are identified as veterans. Is that correct?
Not in faculty services.
That's right.
And Ann and I were conferring, there's a new project that we talked about this morning with Dr. Burr's group, where we're looking at a student profile, kind of a one-stop shop on RadarNet. So we click on a link, you can see the student's picture, you can see their advisor, when they graduate, the program of study, and then I'm thinking there's certain other things we would identify: veteran, athlete, trio,
All of the special status.
yeah, the special things that might, oh, well, this person's gonna have some special needs. That's something that we kind of brainstormed about and we're gonna be working on. I don't know how soon it will be rolled out, but some faculty have requested that we have maybe more of a one-stop shop. So that's something that ITD will be doing.
On their classrooms, for the academic officers, it does mark.
So that is one way.
On the roster,
Exactly.
they're a monitored population, correct?
That's what I'm saying.
That's right.
If you look at the academic roster, it marks what they're being monitored for. It's all veterans monitored. You can see where they're.
And Ray's staff is using the academic alert to get a heads up on attendance issues early on, because he has to notify the DA within 30 days when a bid drops out. And his staff is calling his vets to see what's going on. If there's something we can help, can we provide them some help? Was a mistake the way it was reported? So we are using, I know some faculty may think, what are we doing with this academic alert reporting? We are using it for various populations to see how we can reach out and help. I know there were, last semester, it's impossible to call everybody, but I know we called about 100 students. And out of those students, I had one student who thought he had dropped the class, and one student who thought he had totally withdrawn from the class. So there are some things that we're able to jump on early on and solve, rather than waiting to the end of the semester, because we have this reporting.
There's some sneaky stuff you can do. At the beginning of each of my classes, I will say part of what we're going to be discussing are some differences between, I will say, you kids and the older students. There's some different approaches in here. By the way, if you're an older student, would you mind kind of helping out in class a little bit more? Kind of call on you a little bit more. And many times the veterans will come down, and the other adults as well, will come down and self-identify. Yeah, I had this experience. I'll be glad to help out here. So again, you're asking for the veterans in particular. I think you can make it general enough that you can attract some attention from them to want to help out, and you can see who they are.
You're a team.
It's all media national, it's all sneaky stuff.
That's all right.
What I've found though, and this is really interesting, because I teach public speaking a lot, is I have them write a 2-page paper, every student with it, just tell me who they are, where they've been, blah, blah, blah. But I've noticed over the years that of the students who stand up on their first day to give a speech about who they are, only half of them who are vets will identify themselves as vets, stick around the class, but will identify themselves as a vet in the paper. I think it's very interesting. But I've never had a vet in class come to me after the paper couldn't identify and say, oh, by the way, I'm a vet. Every vet has always identified the paper because I tell them it's 100% confidential and no one sees it. And so I think there's some that slide under the radar because they just want to.
You can do some, I hate to use the word profiling, but the older student in the class who's a little more self-assured, probably a little better dressed, probably shorter hair, you can sort of tell in general who those people are. And you just identify them, and you could ask after, by the way, you're a veteran. I know you're a little older than my other students. You're a veteran. And,
Any last comments? We're very close to being out of time. For not only for you, but for the audience that might listen in on this recording, I do want to encourage all of you to come to the next seminar. We'll have 2 more seminars this semester. And remember that the purpose of these seminars is to prepare us as faculty and staff members to better address the needs of this group of our students. None of us are experts in this. We all want to learn together and make ourselves better together. Again, I want to thank all of you panelists for serving as our local experts for the moment. And I do want to thank everybody for attending today. Please feel free to stay after we close the session and help us consume that 5 gallons of iced tea back there and the pile of cookies that are on the table. For those of you who couldn't attend, too bad.